Hey everyone, it's Susan Peirce Thompson and welcome to the weekly vlog. This morning I received a private Facebook message from somebody and it was long. And I wouldn't typically see a message coming into Facebook. I don't spend much time in Facebook except to do bright line eating stuff, but I got a notification that popped up in the bottom right corner of my computer screen. I should figure out how to turn those off. And because I was in the predisposed mood to maybe procrastinate on what I should have been doing, I decided to hop over there and click on it. I could read the first couple lines and it just looked pretty intriguing. So I clicked over there and it was this message, and I just want to talk about it a little bit because it affected me. It was a boot camper. We've got 2 boot camps running right now. She's in the more recent one. So she's been doing bright line eating for, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks. And this is what she said. She said, Susan, I started bright line eating a little while ago, and for the first 2 weeks it was amazing. I felt so free, and the food like snapped into place, and suddenly I had no cravings, and I lost a ton of weight, and like 7 pounds or something like that in the first 2 weeks. And I just felt great, and that was the beginning of the email. And then I binged. And I've been binging now for days, and I'm in a really dark place. And then there were a couple more paragraphs that went into that, and she said, I'm really struggling with the rigidity of bright line eating, and I feel like I'm in a box, and it feels so extreme. And I'm just not sure this is the path for me. I'm struggling with that. And then the next paragraph said, I've got family and friends that I'm hiding from because I now have this amazing bright line eating support community, and I'm sneaking off to go message them and communicate with them, and I don't want my friends and my family to know. And so I feel like I'm living this double life all of a sudden. And she said, I'm just struggling so much. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of this. The food feels so strong. And then she said, I have this dream, this daydream, this vision of you sometime in the future talking about me and sharing about how I've gotten through my bright line eating challenges and I'm now happy, thin, and free, and a success story. And you talk about this message that I'm sending you right now, and it's all behind me. And now I've figured all this out, and I'm finally out of the food, and I'm completely free. She said, I want to be that success story, and I don't know if I can. I'm drowning. I'm struggling. I literally don't know what else to do, so I'm sending you this message. SOS 911, please help. So I read this message. There was more, but that's the bare bones. That's the outline of it. And I wrote back. And I said, first of all, I so understand that pain. I've been there so many times, face down in a bowl of cookie dough, literally not sure I can get out of the food. And when I'm there, here's what I do. First thing is I trust, just like that vision of you in the future being able to be a success story and a case study and an example. I trust. And then the next thing is I inventory my program. There's a lot to bright line eating. Am I really doing it? What could I tweak to maybe give myself a better shot at success? There's a lot to that. And then I let the food addiction run its course. Sometimes you kind of got to wait for the roller coaster ride to stop. But when it does, and there's a little moment of hope, when you can get off that scary ride and onto safe land, it's like looking for the moment, the little window of opening, the little moment of sanity where you can step over to the other side and get on your bright lines again. I said, I look for that window. Just look for that window. It's usually something inside. It's not external. It's a little switch flips inside, and you just have a moment, and then hop on some social support really fast. Reach out to people and say, hey, I'm back. I'm 2 minutes on my bright lines and I could use some support. And then in my response I said, And I just want to say, if I may, that I hear some red flags here. So bright line eating is really extreme and rigid. I get that. That's a narrative you're telling yourself. That's a story you're spinning. And there's definitely a way of looking at it that's true. I mean, we don't eat any sugar or flour. We only, at meal times, we don't snack. We, bound our quantities. Many of us use a digital food scale to weigh our food. Okay, that's extreme. I said, you can look at that narrative, though. Is that narrative really serving you? You've spun a story about bright line eating and what it is and how you feel constrained. Now, the feeling of constraint and being in a box, I remember that feeling. And I talk about this a lot. It lasts for a while, but it frees up. It loosens up. I think about maybe a really active alcoholic who stops drinking probably feels like they're in a box for a while. Like, it's an incredibly constrained life to not drink for them. 5 years later, they don't feel that way anymore. Doesn't even take 5 years, but you know what I mean. It's temporary, and then it loosens up. And I said, another red flag that I have is about you feeling like you can't share about bright line eating with your friends and family. I mean, again, that's a narrative you're telling yourself, that what I'm doing is weird and it's clandestine, and here I am again trying another food thing, and everyone will think I'm crazy. And like, okay, I shared with her a motto that I like, which is, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter won't mind. Really. And other people latch on to the narrative that we're spinning. So if you tell yourself that what you're doing is weird and freakish, and here you are again trying another thing, okay, that'll come across. But if you tell yourself, well, I'm empowered when I stick with my bright lines, I love myself when I stick with my bright lines, like those first 2 weeks she described, I have freedom when I stick with my bright lines, this is who I am and what I do, and it serves me, then, who amongst your loved ones are going to argue with that? And even if they do, okay. I mean, there's people who try to convince recovering alcoholics to drink on New Year's Eve. Okay, no thank you is still the appropriate response. Sorry that offends you, that I'm not having a drink. No thank you. So I think it's important for us to watch the narrative that we spin. Life does not show up in realities. Life doesn't show up in facts. Life shows up in a very interesting and complicated montage. And then we get to tell the story. We get to ascribe the meaning to what's happening. And there's a lot of choice in that. There's a lot of empowerment in that. Are you spinning a story that serves you? Because you can change that. The same childhood. Okay, let me just tell you a little story here. My Grandma Polly, my beloved Grandma Polly, I was her only grandchild. I was so close to her. Rest in peace, my beloved Grandma Polly. She had one sister, and they were raised in Bangor, Maine, in a farmhouse. And her father was the pharmacist in Bangor, Maine. We're talking about the turn of the century, 1900, 1910, 1920. We're talking about right in there. And if you interviewed, they're both passed now, but if you interviewed my Grandma Polly and her sister, my Aunt Charlotte, and you interviewed them, you would learn that, so I think I just gave the wrong name. It was a great aunt that I didn't actually meet that much. I think it was my great aunt Kay, and my mother's father's mother was Charlotte. I just got the name wrong. Anyway, my great auntie Kay. If you interviewed Grandma Polly and great auntie Kay, here's what they would tell you about their childhood. Grandma Polly would say, my childhood was awful. It was relatively abusive. My father was a drug addict. There were bugs crawling in the sofa. Everything was kind of vaguely unsafe and unclean, and I got out of my house as quickly as possible. I married and got out of the house because it was intolerable. And great auntie Kay would say, My mother was the best cook on the block. There was good smells coming from our house every day. Completely different narrative. Same childhood. Probably both of those things are true. But it's all a matter of perception. And my grandma Polly pulled herself up by her bootstraps and got out of Dodge. And Auntie Kay, bought the house down the street and married Uncle Alton and had some kids. So, it's all the narrative that we tell about our lives. There are no facts. There's just a story that we spin about it. So as you're spinning stories about your life, be sure that you tell stories that serve you. Or it behooves you to, right? And if you're feeling stuck, take a look at what you're saying about it. And maybe there's a way to get unstuck by deciding to believe a different narrative. Equally true, but just more conducive to happiness and well-being. So the last thing I just want to say is she wrote back. And she said, Susan, thank you. She's actually in the helping professions, so she knows this thing about, we have to watch the stories we tell about our lives. Something she's very familiar with. And she said, thank you for that. And, you're right. She said, you're right. My family already think I'm wacko with food. I'm vegan and I'm gluten-free. If I add sugar and flour to the list, nobody's going to bat an eye. I'm totally making that one up. And she said, thank you for sharing that the feeling of constriction loosens up. And I just want to say it really, really does. It really does. Today is Wednesday, April 6th. And tomorrow, April 7th, is my husband's 44th birthday. Just to illustrate. I don't know if we're having cake. I don't really care if we're having cake. It's fine if we do. It's fine if we don't. I'm now 13 years in, almost 13 years into my bright line eating journey. And to my memory, not once in those 13 years have I eaten a piece of cake because it was someone's birthday. I'm like the sober alcoholic at New Year's Eve. I say no thank you to the champagne. I say no thank you to the birthday cake. Never eaten birthday cake in those 13 years because of someone's birthday, right? I just don't eat cake. I don't care anymore. I'm completely free. There's no sense in which that's challenging for me. When I turned 40, coming up on 2 years ago, I did have a cake at my 40th birthday. As a matter of fact, I had 2 cakes. And one of them was massive because I wanted 40 candles on it. I wanted to be able to blow out 40 candles. And I did in one breath. I practiced. I nailed it. It was easy. Blew them out. The cake was a prop. I didn't think twice about it after that. I hung out with people, hugged my friends and my family. There is freedom on the other side of sticking with the bright lines. And if you're someone like I am who has to stick with the bright lines because otherwise your life goes to hell, then you have 2 choices. You can go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of your intolerable situation as best you can, shoving food into your face to do the blotting, or you could step off that madness and accept a different way to live. Yes, it's a trade-off. Yes, there are challenges with bright line eating. No, it's not ideal and not perfect. I have a saying, I keep my food black and white so I can live my life in living color. I didn't come up with that. The people who taught me bright line eating came up with that. I keep my food black and white so I can live my life in living color. There are people who get to have their food in living color and their life in living color. They're foodies, they're chefs, they're a normal weight, or maybe they're not and they don't care and they're not unhealthy. They just love their food and that's part of their life and they love that. I can bang my head against the wall all day long, but it will not turn me into one of those people. When I eat like that, I'm not happy or free, regardless of whether I'm thin or not. I'm not happy or free. It doesn't work for me. And I can keep eating that food, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation all day long. It doesn't change it. So for me, the only option is to work a program of recovery around it, to do bright line eating, to live happy, thin, and free. So anyway, for anyone who's struggling with the food, I hope that's helpful. Look for your little window. Keep in mind the narrative, the story that you're telling about what's going on. See if it serves you. And remember that the freedom comes. The freedom comes. So that's the weekly vlog. And if you have something you'd like me to talk about in a future vlog, just send it in. I'm at susan@brightlineeating.com. I'll see you next week.